So this is Bank Holiday Monday evening, the 25th of May. We've just had a whole afternoon of coronavirus. We've had the press conference by Dominic Cummings, followed by the press conference led by Boris Johnson. I think I said last week that I thought Dominic Cummings should probably resign, just take a bit of the pressure off himself, off the government. That probably remains my view. I'm not going to strongly insist on that, but I think it would be the best course of action, just take a bit of heat out of this situation. But I admire the way he's stood up to the bullying by the press. He's answered the questions that they posed openly, to the best of his ability. Of course, he's not going to apologise, because if he apologises, then they'll just drive at him. So you admit you made a mistake. So you can't apologise. You can only explain the reasoning for why you did what you did. And I think the thing that was new for me, and I hadn't really appreciated, was the fact that he felt unsafe in his London home. And that could be a very clever fabrication, or it could be how he felt. But certainly the action of the media over the last 4 days, and also protesters that have gathered around his home, certainly has given me sympathy for that was his thinking, and that's why he wanted to get out of London, get to a relatively safe place in Durham, not let on where he was. Fascinating that a minute past 4, so that was a minute after he was due to start speaking, the Durham police retracted their previous statement and finally admitted that they had only spoken to Mr. Cummings Sr., and that was on a matter of the security of the household, now that they had Dominic Cummings and his family there. So those people in the police there have obviously got egg on their faces. Total clear up on the accusation that he went to London and then came back. And all along, Downing Street have been saying that there were errors in that story, and clearly it was proved that there were. He very bravely admitted that he drove to Barnwood Castle to test his ability to drive. Was that a winning argument? I don't know. It does make you wonder, though, when you're driving, just watch out for people who are also similarly testing their ability to drive. Whether he would have been insured for that or not, I don't know. We just need somebody very clever now to work out whether you can get a Discovery Sport from London to to Durham on one tank of fuel. But other than that, I think we need to draw a line under it. We've got some very positive news on how the figures are beginning to fall off. This clearly has been an anti-Brexit, we hate Dominic Cummings media witch hunt. I still think he should take himself out of the public eye now for a couple of months. We'll get coronavirus out of the way and then bring him back in to sort out Brexit. So I'll update the podcast on Saturday, but as of Monday evening, a good performance by Dominic Cummings. Good morning and welcome to the Coronavirus Podcast Week 10. It's Saturday morning, just a few days after I made that previous supplementary on the topic of Dominic Cummings. During the week, Boris Johnson has stood by his man. Dominic Cummings has not resigned or been sacked, and the story has gradually faded from the headlines and from the daily press conference. It doesn't mean to say there's not a lot of anger still in the country. From my perspective, I think I've been quite clear. At first I thought he should resign. Then when I listened to him, I thought on balance he probably had acted reasonably. Probably only doubt is over the drive to Barnard Castle to test the resilience of his ability to drive. But that's, on balance, the whole trip, taking yourself away from the dangers as he saw it in London, was the correct thing to do. So I'm going to write that up in my blog and then draw a line under that. Looking at our virus response at a wider level, we are beginning to release some of the lockdown measures very gradually, testing the R number as we go, and it does look like next week things will begin to ease, schools will go back, and we'll see where we are. Track and trace is now in place. Got a certain ring to it. We don't have the app yet. There's obviously a lot of challenges about privacy and security associated with the app. People very keen to make sure that we don't, as they say, sleepwalk into surveillance. But it's just not basically working at all at the moment. In line with what we tend to do in this country, we've gone for a slightly different solution than probably the rest of the world, although France are trying to follow a centralised solution as well, where all the data from people's phones is taken into a central database to work out where the contacts have been. And we will see how that goes. I think there's always the possibility that we might go back to the decentralised system. We'll drop back to that, as that seems to be more readily available. And people call that the Apple-Google system, which obviously has certain worries for people that feel they're giving all their information to Apple and Google. But as one of the specialists said in the week, well, think of all the data you give about yourself to Facebook, so what's really any difference? And if you compare that with the alternatives of staying locked down, then perhaps for a short time it's an appropriate price to pay. I've explained before that disappointingly the UK has the highest number of deaths in Europe. I've also noticed this week that in terms of excess deaths, that's the number of deaths above the average you would expect over this period, and we're at something like 57,000, of which only about 47,000 can in any way be attributed to COVID-19. So you do have to wonder where those that extra 10,000 deaths came from. Clearly the experts will continue the analysis. I imagine it's one of these things you've got to look at over time, so it's over 12 months. That's where the number of excess deaths becomes more relevant. I imagine that as we go into the summer months, the number of deaths will actually fall below average, and then we'll be able to measure the number of excess deaths over the 12 months period. But it is a puzzle, and I don't know at the moment how they're accounting for those additional deaths. So that's it. I think probably this will be the last of these spoken blogs. They probably run their course and serve their purpose. On an equestrian front, I've been approached by virtual Bramham for some video of dressage at Bramham, which luckily I do have a couple of tests from when we went on the Belsay Bramham road trip a couple of years ago. So I've made those available to BHS, check with Bramham and with BD that they're happy for those to be used. I say BD because they want to compare eventing dressage with, dare I say it, proper dressage, and I'm not always sure that's an appropriate comparison. The horses are obviously different types of athlete, but anyway, if that keeps them amused for a few hours, then I guess the experts can discuss the difference. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the journey through the 10 weeks of lockdown. Keep safe, and hope we're all back out competing soon. Bye.